Okay, so now I actually had time to sit here and like kind of go through the wiki for Jung, which I hadn't done, so kind of works out.
Cool.
Okay, well, let's roll on into it, and I'll just do a short introduction. And sorry, could I get your name one more time there?
Tara
Tara. Okay, thank you. I actually have
and
listened to a
Mark.
few. I know you. I've heard her name too. I listened to a few of the more recent episodes, but yeah. So
Right on.
I've been shifting where I listen. Okay, I'll go ahead and dive into this. Welcome to Aural Hygiene. This is a podcast where we look at educational films, experimental caught films, and interesting documentaries. This is Matt with me today. I've got Mark and Tara from the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast. Thanks for joining us again.
Thank you for having us.
You got your new artwork up on the feed now. That's kind of fun. I like that.
Thank you. Yeah, an artistic choice to put that raven in there. It symbolizes a lot of what we'll be getting into more and more on the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast.
Right on. Although I should note on my iPad, it still shows the old artwork for some reason. So maybe it just takes some
Yeah.
time to.
Podcast apps, they take a while to reset those RSS feeds. Some podcast apps don't ever reset the RSS feed. You got to do it manually. So sometimes it just depends on what app you're using.
Yeah. And sorry, I should mention for the listener, we had to kind of jury rig the recording a bit today. So if it's a little more lo-fi, sorry, but hopefully what we are talking about should overcome that. So, and today that is a documentary, well, an interview from 1959 with Carl Jung. And Mark, could you give us a quick, rundown of what we're seeing here?
Yeah, it's an interview between a gentleman and Carl Jung. I thought it was fantastic, which is why I sent it to you. Some of the things that Carl Jung mentioned in there, they started with the typical interview type questions they had. Where'd you grow up? What was growing up like? And Carl Jung answered some questions, and that kind of led into some religious, spiritual questions that I thought were fascinating. I don't know if you caught the part where he mentioned being a part of whatever church it was, and the interviewer said, did you believe in God when you were a part of this church? He goes, well, sort of, and then he asks him, do you believe in God now? And he goes, no, I don't believe in God. I know. I don't need to believe. I know. And I thought that was just so profound. And that was part of the reason why I sent this to you for us to have this conversation.
Yeah, and I think that is sort of the money shot, so to speak, from this documentary. I've heard that quoted around a few times. Um, I'll just throw out my couple synchronicities because when you said, "Hey, let's do Jung," just a few days before, maybe a week before, my wife and my mother-in-law had done the spring cleaning and gone a little too nuts with it. So I went not quite dumpster diving, but I saved a few things from the trash, and one of them actually turned out to be the portable Jung, the one edited by Joseph Campbell. So it was kind of just for the synchronicity. Hey, let's do Jung. I'm like, I just saved Jung from the garbage, so that was kind of fun. A few other things.
Right on.
I also saved this monkey puppet, so that was nice. A cookie monster. That's at work though. I attack my students with a cookie monster now sometimes for funsies. It was kind of weird though. I guess the interview style is like you said, what Jung says is generally quite sharp. I was not sure about the interviewing style. Maybe it was too antiquated or something with John Freeman. I was like, I could do better in this.
Yeah, I did feel a little like the interviewer was missing some of the points that Jung was making. Like he had a prepared script that he wasn't able to leave, you know, like he didn't write the questions himself. That's kind of the impression I got. Because I feel like now with podcasting, we're kind of used to a more free flow style of interview where you might ask a follow up question that comes out of nowhere, whereas that felt very scripted.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I do is, I mean, I sent you my notes, but otherwise, I don't actually think of any questions or anything ahead of time. Obviously, I set up the monkey puppet because it's right there, but that was a last minute thought there.
Orchestrating, huh?
Yeah, that's the beginning and end of my orchestrations here. But I don't need an excuse to play with a monkey puppet anyway. Um, yeah, one of the first questions too, like you said, it's a little bit about your life, but the first one, when did you first feel consciousness of your own individual self? I'm like, man, I don't think I can answer that. Or maybe I
Yeah,
can.
that was, you know, best asked to a man like Jung. I feel like that's something he wrestled with his whole life, right? This idea of the self, and yeah, he had an answer for it. You know, maybe it's something that we don't really think of often now in our current culture, but I think it might have been more of a noticeable thing when there was less distraction. You know, you consider how Jung described his upbringing in a very rural place. You know, people in that setting, they got things to do. You know, they've got a lot of chores and what things to maintain the house, get food, keep things going, right? So as soon as a kid is past that stage of like floating around in the kid like dream consciousness and they kind of have that self-awareness, then they're useful. You know, now you're going to get a plow and plow the field, or you're going to hop on the tractor and learn how to do it. So maybe that is a more, yeah, antiquated for sure, but an indicator of the environment Jung grew up in. The fact that he was like, yeah, I was conscious at this age.
Well, I know the you know, with the Aboriginal or the Australian Aboriginal idea is I've heard they don't really make plans. Everyone just kind of shows up to do the thing at the time because that's the time to do it.
Right.
So
Yeah,
that's
this is very synchronistic because Tara and I have been thinking a lot about time, and what you just mentioned is very similar to some of the things that we've been working on. And Jung is the guy who kind of coined the phrase synchronicity. You know, he brought this word into the zeitgeist, and time, synchronicity, these are unseparable concepts. You know, they go hand in hand.
or do we have to credit Sting with really pushing that word into the mainstream? But I mean,
Thing.
yeah, again, well, from 6 years old, I already knew the word, right? Because you got the Police song. So, I mean,
Mm,
it worked.
right,
um,
right.
I, I, I did start thinking about my answer to that question after my snarky, like, you can't answer that. So, I guess there's two ways. One would be your first, like, super enlightenment, like, detailed moment. One might be a first memory. So, we can psycho analytically analyze ourselves just for fun, and I'll knock out earliest memory. The earliest thing I can work out is being in, I guess I was born in 79, so it would have been a relatively late 70s, 80s fashion, like townhouse with a spiral staircase. Maybe my parents were visiting some friends. And one thing is that I can't quite tell if that's a dream memory or a fabricated one or a real one. So, because that would have been when I was like 2 years old. But just for, can you actually work out an early, like, hey, what's the haziest earliest memory you can work out?
Mm. Well, you know, this is something that's very personal to me, but I remember being on the shore of this lake that my family would all go to every summer and looking up and seeing a bird circling overhead. That was probably one of the earliest, or maybe like Disneyland, cliche as that sounds, like flying down to Florida at 6 years old was definitely memorable because, you know, going on a plane and whatnot and being in a totally different environment. Those memories stand out in my mind for sure. Sarah?
I think the earliest memory is walking up to a burro, like a donkey, in the desert in Vegas when I was about 4.
Interesting. Okay. No, a lot of in Japan, a lot of kids like mine's from age 2. You've got one from age 4. A lot of my teenage students, they'll claim that they don't remember anything until like elementary school, which kind of blows my mind. And I wonder if it's a
Very
cultural thing.
interesting. What is life like for kids before elementary school in Japan?
One interesting thing is I think Japan has a reputation for being kind like, strict and disciplinary in their school system, but they do let the kindergarten students just go fucking nuts. So, which I have to deal with a little bit of that. But yeah, when my daughter was in kindergarten, they call all of the preschool years kindergarten, but it was this. It's not there anymore. Now it's just a overgrown patch of weeds, which is weird because my kindergarten in America, I think, is still there. But this is like this really old structure and it's sort of a C shape and a field in the middle. It's a pretty common construction for a Japanese kindergarten. And I actually went there a few times to teach English, and I go in and it's this rickety old building. They have like this giant gas furnace going in the middle of winter. So that was like a time shift. It was like going way back in time, even for my daughter's classes.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, speaking of time shift, did you hear that? What was that? A crow or a sparrow or something? Blue jay out our window. There he
Oh,
is.
okay. Yeah, I do note the birds. I don't think we get ambient sound on my end because I haven't heard any trains come by in the podcast, and it's pretty loud when they do. So get birds in the recording. So the other, getting back to that first question, that would, okay, first I feel consciousness, first memory. The other one is when did you, there's a good Indian term for it. Sorry, I can't, maybe you know what I'm talking about, but it's a flash of pure consciousness, just when you observe everything, usually just for a split second. I guess a master is able to do this all the time, but this is
Hmm.
2016. I'd only really started meditating a few months before, and I think I mentioned before the main purpose was I was like, hey, can I get the DMT in my head working? Which yes, you can, but there's really a different goal there. But being at a barbecue, Japanese style barbecue, that's fun. They just throw meat on a grill and then you eat it. So no hamburgers, no hot dogs, just meat, a few vegetables. But we're doing there. I just look out and it's we're outside, but in a carport, and there's a frame like a window, and I just look through there and just the whole universe, like poof, all the colors burst out. And I actually had my camera, so I shot a photo of it. Maybe I'll send that along later. But so
Yeah, please do.
not only did I get the flash of enlightenment, but I also, took a picture of it. So that was kind of cool. Why don't you take a picture
Yeah.
longer? Um, I feel like I can, a lot of people you can't be like, when did you have the universe open up? But I feel like you're safe people to ask if you had a first moment for that.
Well, no, I definitely think, I mean, Tara, do you want to go first? But I definitely think I have a moment where I had that type of revelation or epiphany. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely did too. Like a spiritual awakening, you mean, or just like one specific moment where everything comes together?
Yeah, just a flash of reality, so to speak.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that happens often.
Oh yeah, though it happens more and more. But I was just wondering if you're able to pinpoint the first time that you really had a
Oh, the first
flash.
time. Ah, hmm.
Was it at a young age?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, well, my great, yeah, well, I mean, greatest flash of reality was probably when I was 11 and my father died. It was like, boom. And that started a process that I think triggers these flashes of reality more and more over time. And then I think maybe my more conscious first flash was um, in the jungle in Costa Rica.
That sounds like a fun place
It's
for it.
there.
Although I'm like, okay, I'm sitting here like, oh, I'm jealous of that. But I'm like, well, mine is in the mountains in Japan. I guess you can't complain, can I?
Yeah.
I'm
Right
gonna
on. Yeah.
I'm gonna see if I can share the screen for a moment because I actually did find this. Downloads. There's my screen. Sorry. Oh, there we go. I actually did find this photo. Can you see my screen?
A
Oop,
moment. Loading. Yep. You see it.
just for fun, I just tracked it down. It actually wasn't too hard. It's you can see the thumbnail now, but it's loading. Thinking about it. I got a creaky old computer here too, so I don't know if yours is creaky or old, but I have a
No,
computer that doesn't. There we go. That was it. I caught it, so I took out my phone and took a picture. I just thought it might be important, and I guess now it is. So, but yeah. Here, I
Well,
just looked
we're still
outside,
waiting.
and oh, it's still waiting.
Still
Okay.
waiting on it to load. Don't worry. We're not unimpressed. We're just waiting for it to load.
That's cool. Mark, do you have one of those moments while it's thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, in light of Tara's profound spiritual experiences, mine seem kind of minor, but that's just because I know her very well. But I would say for me, it was definitely this one moment where I meditated, and I want to say I lost consciousness, but it wasn't the way that you would typically black out. I would say it was more of a whiteout, like white light flooding in as I was doing this mantra. And I opened my eyes, and, on the ground in front of me, if you're not sharing your screen, but I can see the thumbnail. It's very, very
Yeah, we'll have to go for the
colorful.
thumbnail for now. But okay, I'll stop that. But yeah, that's what I had going. But we got your
But
feather.
yeah, I woke up from this sort of whiteout, and this feather was very, very almost weightless, suspended on this tall grass in front of me. And it all synchronistically wrapped into something that I was learning from a mentor of mine at that age. So that was definitely, at the very least, a moment of realization of what life had to offer, and maybe some of the spots where I wasn't quite aware and awakened yet. So yeah.
I guess that's sort of like the Jung story with the scarab, where the lady. I mean, I think it's in the On Synchronicity essay, where she's like, I had this dream,
Yeah.
and it was I saw a Egyptian scarab or something. And he just sees it right outside the window, opens the window. Oh, like this one. So
Yeah. Jung was trying to prove that point to, I think it was someone he was, it was like a fiance or a wife or someone he was, in a relationship with in a deep way. And he was trying to convey this to them, or someone that worked for him. I'm not quite sure who it was, maybe a student, but yeah, it was very interesting how, this man had an almost magnetic ability in that way. And I think we all do. We all tap into that. And that's what Carl Jung was kind of saying towards the end of the interview when he mentioned like how he wanted to go to other places and
having a short breakdown. There we go. Okay, you're
we're
back in the room.
back. Where'd you lose me?
Let's see. It was
That.
he's how things would just sort of happen around Carl Jung with his magnetic personality, but I we all do start to see this in our own lives as we will get trippier with our own lives, I guess. So
Right, and this is like the side effect of his inquiry into these subjects. Like one of the things that he mentioned when he was talking about his career choice was psychiatry was his choice because it gave him the freedom to look into all these different ideologies, and I think he was really good at synthesizing, contrasting ideologies.
Sorry, I lost you at synthesizing and contrasting.
Synthesizing, contrasting ideologies. You didn't lose too much. I stopped it there. I was getting a little connection issues. Let me try to switch over to my computer. Do you do video for this, or is it audio only?
It's based. I like archive the video onto YouTube just because I don't want to keep it on my computer, but I haven't bothered to like actually promote that video. So it's there. But if you want to shut down video, that's fine.
So it might be, I mean, a pain in the ass to edit, but if you want, I can leave and join back on my
Go ahead and
computer
give that.
here now that I have more CP.
Yeah, let's try that. Yeah. Let's try the computer because that cut out again. And I mean, I'm already, I can look at my sound file and it's easy to edit because I just see silence.
Oh,
All right. Now we're going hi-fi. That's cool. Okay.
Hello, can you hear us?
Yeah. Okay. Hopefully that's gonna work out nicer. So, where were we? Oh, I just like the idea. They have 13-year-old or young Carl Jung getting into a young man's alley fight. That I always love stories like that. Um,
Yeah, and he mentions how tough he is and how he swung one boy around by the legs, right? Like he took on 7 boys, he said. So, and he swung one of them around by the legs. I don't know. I've been in a couple fights in my youth, and I don't remember ever having the opportunity to pick someone up by their legs and swing them around. But that's a testament to his strength. At least, I mean, I wonder how tall he is himself. Like was Carl Jung a big tall guy? Was he a little stocky guy? It's you can't tell from watching that just from that seated position, but he does seem to be rather stocky. At least he's not a thin man.
yeah. Yeah, I was thinking. I fortunately never really gotten in any fights. When I was a Boy Scout, I think a Boy Scout and I got into a fist fight just to see what it would be like. But we weren't angry or anything. It's like, let's try this out. Maybe we'd seen too many movies. I don't know. The other story along these lines I just love is there's a story about Bach as a I don't know 25-year-old getting into a knife fight in an alleyway because he called someone a shitty bassoonist. Excuse me, a nanny goat bassoonist. And of course, in German, bassoon is a fagot. So
Oh, really?
yeah. So
Bassoon.
when you read it, you're like, wow, that's but he's just talking about the instrument. He's not, we're putting our modern sensibilities on his insult. But the guy
Yeah,
was still pissed off. So
call the German guy a bassoon and see what happens.
yeah, really.
Where,
So
where did you grow up, Matt? I know you're an expat, right? So you moved to Japan, but what part of the states did you grow up in?
I'm from Atlanta,
Okay, I
a
think you.
suburb of Atlanta. Although most of my family's pretty mid-Atlantic. They're like Delaware, Maryland, and most of them have drifted north to Maine. So,
Okay, interesting. Tara and I were just in Maine 2 weeks ago.
which part of Maine was that?
Right up, the southernmost part, like Old Orchard Beach and
That's
Senko.
where I worked. I
Yeah.
there's at not quite Old Orchard, but a little closer to the jetty. There is a little outdoor center. It's not. I think they've moved inland somewhat now, but we were right on the beach. Um, one I barely know how this stories connects, but maybe it does. There was one of the nor'easters coming through, so maybe 8 in the evening. I'm walking along with a guy a couple of years older than me, but just kind of a thoughtful hippie sort of dude, and very chill guy. But the waves are crazy, just coming in and out of the beach, and suddenly he just starts wave chasing. Like he'll just run out to where the wave is, and then try to run back. I'm like, that's really dangerous. This is the middle of a nor'easter, man. So, well, okay, I guess these, Bach and Jung getting in fights. We're all capable of things that don't seem obvious.
Yeah, and I mean that's reminiscent of what we did when we were up there. We jumped in the water, despite how cold it was. But Young, I was kind of shocked the first time I watched this documentary interview when he said the only man he would kill, like as if there was a man he would kill. I mean, I don't think I could kill anybody unless they were trying to take my life. But it seemed like he took a little bit of joy in saying that, because that professor really put him through a lot of suffering, it seemed like. But yeah, it was a little shocking to hear him say that. Maybe also antiquated.
Um, on a total tangent, I want to tell one more story up from Saco, Maine, which is we were teaching environmental education, and we do a lesson telling kids about how erosion and the jetty and all that. So a guy gets up in front of the kids and he's drawing on a whiteboard, and he's drawing like, okay, because the jetty looks like this and the water comes around like this, and he just like inadvertently drawn like a horrible phallus. So because it's a jetty. So he's got that. And then he's like, yeah, the way the sand moves, we're like, oh my. We're he's like, yeah, the way the sand moves is it's called longshore drift. It's kind of a long word, so I'm just gonna abbreviate it as LSD. So that's when he caught himself right on the D, because these are 13-year-old kids, so they know what's up.
Oh gosh, little poor planning on that lesson plan.
Yeah, but well, hey, you know what? I don't remember any of the other lessons from 20 years ago, but I remember that one. So,
Yeah.
and I remember how longshore drift works now. I don't remember most of the other things, the environmental lessons I'd be teaching there, but I remember that one.
Yeah, I'm sure Young studied some of that memory and memetics and mnemonics, right?
That connected
Yeah,
to the Oedipus complex.
How?
I think that's for Freud, is it?
Yeah, that's more Freud's
oops.
department. Tara.
Sorry, guys.
That's
No,
all
no.
right.
The next thing was going to be about Freud, because John Freeman here is really kind of goading Jung to talk shit about Freud.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
you felt that way too, right? It did seem like he was again had this script that he was sticking to. He had like this pre idea of who Young was. It didn't seem to fit who Young actually was. But that's the style, I think, of that kind of like yellow journalism uh in a way, but also that was a time when, you know, reporters were a little bit more, I mean, this is a documentary, but still
Right. But
interesting.
yeah, because I guess we call Freud's psychoanalysis. That's where I was stumbling over my words earlier because I was about to say Jung was psychoanalyzing. I'm like, no, 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 he didn't psychoanalyze. He did analytical, not psychosis. I don't know. I don't. I'm jumping all over my own words, but
Oh, analytical psychology, is that what you're, I mean,
that's what I'm trying to spit out in the worst way possible. Yes. There was another. I found this on the wiki page where he used schizophrenia in like a really weird way. It was like having a schizophrenia, which I thought was odd. I think
Freud,
when, yeah,
that
when,
did come up in the Young interview, is the topic of schizophrenia.
yeah, this is a quote that he said, not in the interview, but I was reading the wiki, but just the way he phrased it, getting back to music a little bit, he said, I thought I had a schizophrenia, and I never heard it referred to as like a noun before. So, I play in orchestras and stuff. That makes me think of a scherzo, which is a joke. So
Hmm.
just
It
for
did seem like there was a little bit of an English to whatever Jung's native language was barrier, right? Like some of the words they were using, he was using was like mixed.
true, true. So I guess, but the weird context then made me think, scherzo, schizophrenia, and I was like, wow, those words really are super similar, and a scherzo is a joke. So I
Interesting.
just, I don't know what that means. It's just word association. But if you're talking about Carl Jung, you get to do that, right?
A joke of the unconscious on the conscious. Schizophrenia. Isn't that where the unconscious kind of overrides the conscious mind? So it's like, "La, la, la, la."
In a way, yeah, that's one way to look at it, I would say.
Or you're catching things, your senses are picking up extra things, and you're just not able to process it properly.
Mm.
Yeah.
Too many things in a rush, or just getting something but not seeing it in the right way. So yeah. Um, well, where was I? Dun, dun. Oh yes, yes. I definitely want to get into the idea that's also not in this interview, but we can certainly overlay it on this interview. That Jung was really kind of like a secret occultist, and I don't mean that in like a conspiratorial way. Just like that was, alchemy did turn out to be one of his main aims, even though on the face of things, he'd usually, like he is in 1959, showing up as the wizened old professor. But
Right. Well, his book Psychology and Alchemy, it's beautiful. Tara and I were just looking at it. It's behind me, right over my shoulder there. This shoulder. Oh, this shoulder. but
there we go.
but yeah, it takes you through alchemy as a psychological process of self improvement, right? The self being an explanation for our consciousness, but also our relationship with the external environment, right? So Jung had it in his psychoanalytical way, uh, sort of schemed out to be kind of layered, right? You have your subconscious, then your conscious, then your super conscious, and this is how you interact with this same multi-dimensional environment. And he's in this book using different myths and stories from, in a sort of Joseph Campbell sort of way, to show the psychological themes in these alchemical symbols, right? Revealing that maybe the occult all along was just about this kind of psychological art of improving your consciousness to be a more successful being in your environment, whether that whatever success means to you, or actualizing yourself, like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that top of the pyramid, People from the dawn of time have sought that out. You know, that's our sort of, you know, the antithesis, or the, not the antithesis, the height of who we
Evolution
can
of
become.
consciousness.
Yeah,
And
and
even,
also,
yeah, the unconscious conscious.
well, and the evolution of it too, and that's kind of part of why he's looking at the mythology and connecting these stories from our past to show how the human mind, or the psyche as he calls it in this documentary, um, has evolved through these stages. And he even says, I have it written down, man will never deviate from the original pattern, and man cannot stand a meaningless life, right? So that Maslow hierarchy of needs, that top of the pyramid there, that's meaning. You know, we strive for finding meaning, and Carl Jung found that all over the world, and that's part of his theories. Like, this is a universal thing. We as man are all the same. We all share the same consciousness, which was a radical idea at his time, because a lot of people were thinking like, hey, you know, maybe these aboriginals think one way, and people from Africa think another way, and people from Asia think another way. No, no, no. This was all, you know, changed with the help of psychologists like Carl Jung. You know, we are all human beings. We all share the same consciousness, and it's unique and varied in many, many different ways. But at the root, it follows that same pattern.
Yeah, I mean, instant alchemy. I can introduce myself to someone and concoct a completely true story that makes my life sound like a living hell, and I can concoct a completely true story that makes people think, "Oh, you're leading an enviable life." I could do both of those things right now, but that's all the past. The now is the only thing that matters. So the only thing that's bothering me now is my toe hurts a little bit, and that's my fault.
Yeah, well, and that's part of the hierarchy of needs. You need the security and safety of your body functioning correctly and not running around with stubbed toes.
So you got to take care of your toes so that you continue to evolve in a positive direction.
Yeah, it all
Right?
figures together.
Through this,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think the alchemy and the symbolism, it's all a language of the unconscious that we're translating here with the occult and alchemical process of like making the unconscious conscious again. And
Right. And that's part of what he was saying with this kind of question,
oh,
in that goading kind of way that the interviewer was. His name John Harris, right? Is that
John Freeman.
Freeman? John Freeman. So he asks him about, you know, World War II and how he supposedly predicted World War II in some way, and what are your predictions for World War III? And Jung kind of turned the question around a little bit, saying like, we're on the precipice of a breakthrough in human consciousness, and we need to be able to understand our own psyche, because man is the greatest danger to himself. Like, when we look out in the universe, especially at that time, they were saying, you know, oh, this is a danger, that communism is a danger, nuclear weapons are a danger, all these dangers, you know, and they're off the brink of World War II. So that the loss of life is fresh, you know, it's real, it's visceral, people feel it. You know, there's so much pain in the world at that time. And what Carl Jung says, instead of, you know, prophesizing like Nostradamus, he says like, no, we need to understand our psyche so that we can prevent ourselves from destroying ourselves, right? And I think that's a very wise thing to take away from the documentary itself. And as Tara mentions, you know, the unconscious, right? This is the basis of all of what Jung was studying, the unconscious, how dreams affect our lives, and how synchronicity kind of played into him understanding this, him playing into this larger picture, right? He was piecing together things that were waiting to be pieced together in a way. And I think that connects to what Tara and I have been researching lately, is like signs, symbols, and synchronicities, and how they connect to the overall story that is your life, and how that story connects into the larger story that we're all living in. And Jung shined so much light on the mechanics, so to speak, of our psyche, and used alchemy to kind of connect the dots, because this is not, he's standing on the shoulders of giants, so to speak, right? There's so many figures through time who have studied many different things in that genius like way, and all of them come around to studying alchemy, because alchemy is the process of transmuting lead to gold. What does that mean? Your lead consciousness to gold consciousness, a dark shadow consciousness to light, to the sun, right? So this is kind of where Jung came at, just by studying psychology as a psychiatrist, as a doctor, as somebody who loved nature. He didn't go around looking like in a Harry Potter type way for spell books and doing black magic cauldron stuff with toads. When people think of alchemy and the occult, that's what they think of. They think of Crowley, like our first conversation that you and I had in the first documentary that you and I had. But what's so beautiful is how Jung and Crowley were kind of studying the same thing, how to become what you want to be. And Crowley did it in a negative kind of way. Jung did it in a very positive and uplifting kind of way. So this is a great opportunity, and I'm thankful that you gave us this opportunity to have this conversation on oral hygiene straight from Japan.
Radio. Yeah, I need you to be my hype man. um, have you seen a movie called The Holy Mountain?
I've heard about that. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
I
It's
saw
it's
that
like
a
a
long time
biblical.
ago.
You've seen it?
Yeah.
I
It's
don't remember much except for some disturbing parts on the
Oh, it
mountain.
has lots of disturbing parts. It's
Yeah.
made to be disturbing, but
Probably one of the reasons I didn't watch it.
well. I'll just give a brief sort of synopsis of it, which is all the imagery in it. What happens? It's all sort of that. It's not showing you Crowley things, I think, but it's showing that side of alchemy. It's got where it's surreal as hell. It starts with finding a Jesus on the cross among a bunch of wax Jesuses, and the alchemist takes him up to his pad and has him like shit in a vial, and then he goes to turn that into gold, the literal alchemy thing. But after that, he starts amassing. It's like, I don't remember the set. Maybe I'm going to say 7 because that's always a good number. The 7 most wealthy people on the planet, and convinces them to throw away all of their material wealth and follow him on, to the holy mountain. And I will not spoil the ending of the movie for you, which could absolutely piss you off. But
Okay.
I think it piss you off in a fun way, I'd like to say. But
That'll be our third installment of the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy meets Oral Hygiene documentary digestion series.
that won't go in the experimental film bin, but more than the documentary. But yeah, it is a favorite. It's a midnight movie. The other one, I'm running the risk of bringing up what I talked about a few episodes ago, but I think it's important, especially talk about Carl Jung. I was actually talking to him 2 days ago, which was a member of the classes in the 70s, Jane Roberts ESP classes, where she would channel Seth, who is kind of would be like more super conscious being coming in and saying stuff. And that's some wild stuff that I would recommend. I'm not even like I believe in channeling or anything, and I don't think she did either. But it's what is said is interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a huge theme in Crowley's work, channeling. I mean, he allegedly channeled a being named I Was, his big, long, spelled out name. And that was apparently in the pyramid, the Great Pyramid in Egypt. So, yeah, channeling goes back way further than him, but I think it's very interesting. I myself, Esther Hicks in the Law of Attraction series, like that's a channeled type of information that's benefited me in some ways along my journey. I won't say like I stand by that stuff and I don't like have any of those books anymore, I don't believe, but it's definitely, it was a pivotal shift that I took, and the person that taught me about that stuff was interesting. But there's a lot of different channeled beings, and you know, where and who they're coming from is important, I think. The more like vague names like Bashir and Cryon and, you know, these ones I find less trust in, but I also haven't examined them too thoroughly. But if you go back to like the 19th century, they had the Theosophists, they were channeling all these people, and you know, they had these essentially like ascended masters. And if you look into that, it kind of makes sense that people might have been channeling these beings for wisdom all over the world in different ways. Like, what other explanation would you have for sort of like the ayahuasca story, right? Where these shamans found the one vine out of millions and millions of plants in the Amazon that mixed with these other plants that have DMT in them all naturally, and then created this brew. You know, it's just, and you ask them how they figured it out, they don't say that they, you know, did some kind of pencil and paper work and spent years and years and got slaves and did it, you know, like cut down all these parts of the jungle like they would now if we had to try to figure something out like that. No, no, no. The spirits told them where to go, and the spirits told them which plant. And to me, that's no different than channeling. I think what we have to understand, and this is part of Jung's work, is that our consciousness, our subconsciousness, and our higher consciousness are in this sort of exchange of information, and they're all sensing different fields that we're a part of. And we tend to get focused in on the five senses of this conscious middle part, right? But we have the higher conscious, our higher self, our, you know, guardian angel, some people might say, right? Or, and obviously we have our subconscious. That's very common. But I think what channeling could be is either your, you know, higher consciousness taking some alter ego of yourself, or an actual communication with a being outside of yourself, right? But to me, it's more plausible that this information comes from within, because we are special beings here on this planet. You know, we come as, you know, vessels of light. This body is a vessel for our consciousness, and that's what Jung was beating around the bush to get, and that's what Aleister Crowley, you know, burned the bush down to find out. You know, and that's kind of the two extremes of the way to figure it out, right? But at the end of the day, that's all it is. It's light, you know. And I think that's channeling whoever you want to trust. You got to trust your heart first, because at the end of the day, those people are trusting their heart through whatever they think is going on, and they're going to explain it however they will.
I got two responses are completely different topics. I guess the first one I actually brought up not so much for the channeling, although that is my second response, but not so much for that, but for his description of reality versus Jung's description of the psyche. So in this material, this physical world would be framework one. Again, the five sense one. Framework two is that astral realm, where it does include sort of the higher self part of your soul. That's where this entity said he was basically coming from. Now, here's where it gets really trippy, though. We actually spend equal time in both frameworks. So reality is more like a film strip, which we've heard quantum physicists say in things too. It's weird how much of this actually does dovetail in. The idea is we're blinking out constantly. So when my hand moves, it actually is like it's here. Well, it's even moving there, isn't it? Right? But it's not moving at all. It's totally frozen. And in that split of a second, it flashes, everything disincorporates and becomes framework two, where right now we are making agreements and deciding where to go on a almost telepathic level, and then it's flashing back in for the next frame of framework one, where we are co-creating the entire universe, you know, like billions of times a second. And we get that veil of forgetfulness every time we flash back in, for the most part. You know, that's where the intuition comes in. We kind of remember a little bit about what's happening over there, so to speak. But that's what some of the, you know, sages say, like, don't look for enlightenment, it's always right there, and you're spending half your time in enlightenment no matter who you are.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, we do spend so much of our life sleeping too, right? And that is when we directly connect and go into our astral, ethereal, emotional, whichever, label you want to put on it, that body. And that time, I think it's an indicator of our culture, the fact that we forget our dreams. I don't think that that's uh, something that's supposed to be going on. And I think part of what Jung was talking about is this change that we're going through, the age of Aquarius, right? In the 1960s, the year before, I mean, this was in 1959 when this interview happened, and Jung was pretty old, but I think his work contributed to what we're now feeling in this age of Aquarius, where people are understanding these concepts and these truths in a deeper way, because for so long in the age of Pisces, in the age of duality, there was this kind of covering up of what was true and keeping it from people, and only a select few would have access to it, right? And here we are now, in the now, talking to someone literally on the other side of the globe, and it's beautiful that, my information that I've studied plus the information you've studied now comes together in concert, and we can then inspire people who will find this podcast, which will exist on the internet for as long as it will, which is probably a long, long time. And uh, and that's amazing. I think this is the age of Aquarius that we're in, where people have the ability to share information at such a fast speed, where books were helpful in that mission for 400, 500 or so years. Now we have word again, word, spoken word. That's the real vehicle of knowledge and truth and wisdom. And now with the aid of recording audio and sharing it with other people, we can learn from one another in that really original way. And that connects back to what Jung said about us always being in this pattern, and that's not a bad thing, but we're spiraling, we're spiraling upwards, right? And every time we go around this spiral, we hit the different tones, like different keys on a piano, and each tone affects us in a different way, and we change for the better or the worse as we progress, right? And it's up to us to determine that trajectory of the spiral. We can spiral up or down. And I think that, as we go through these ages, we're evolving as one human, just like we look at animals and their spirit as one, bear spirit, or, humans are one consciousness on the planet. And I think that's something Jung figured out, or tried to explain through his work.
The second thing I wanted to do is get just briefly get back to the channeling idea, where it's like you said, it's really not that special a thing, and when you think about it, you've definitely done it. So I'm asking the listener too, not just the two of you. What what is there something in your life where you're like, yeah, I definitely channeled that. For me, I wrote some songs back in 2012, and I was not I had nothing to say, so I was just trying to put words together that sounded good, right? Which is basically an automatic writing technique, although I didn't know that at the time. I didn't really get into any of this stuff till 2016. So this is like 4 years before I even researched any of these ideas. Now I look back on, I'm like, huh, how did I know that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think all of us have the power to tap into the Akashic record, right? That's a good way to explain it, but that's just the organic version of what we're on right now, the artificial record of information, right? But if you connect with your inner self and your higher self, that information, that light starts to affect you in a progressively better and better way. What's relevant to you will come to the light, and what's relevant to your journey and the information that you need to know. I mean, not everybody needs to go and study the life of Carl Jung or the life of Aleister Crowley or any of the other people that we mentioned today, but that is what we've done in a way, right? Through watching these documentaries, and it's added value to our lives. And that's, at the end of the day, what we're here to do, is bring more value, bring more knowledge, bring more information, light, joy, all of this good stuff into the fold as co-creators, right? And that's kind of what a lot of the channeling people say too, right? Is how to be, law of attraction, co-creation. I think where some of that goes a little too far is when they're like, all you have to do is think about a red Ferrari, and then next week you'll have a red Ferrari, and that's maybe the commercialization of it, where those people, behind the scenes are doing the law of attraction to make the most money possible in their marketing. They're shifting to being more marketing, but that's fine. Everybody has their own path and will reap the rewards or sorrows of the consequences of their actions.
Let me take it back to the alleyway where Jung is swinging people around and Bach is getting into knife fights with bassoonists. So let's say we meet in that dark alley, and then I just murder you. So, oh my God. Okay, so but here's the thing, right? Now, one, that's you never kill anything if you can do it, right? So I'm not. I'm pretty sure I can say I'm not capable of murder, but so let's say the murder in that case. In reality, you're sitting there, you look up, you're like, holy shit, and it all ends, however it ends. So in that other framework, you've actually put out a telepathic call that I could be murdered at this point. So in the second framework, death doesn't really matter that much. It's just like, let's see what happens. In the physical world, it's horrible. But in the second one, you've just put out a signal like, this experience can happen to me now. You pick up on, or the murderer picks up on that particular vibe, like, oh, I can murder this person. I actually do have agreement in this second framework, but you have free will. So you always have the choice not to do it. And that's part of growth. Someone is saying, yes, you can do this. We can have this experience from this, deeper inner self, higher self frame of mind. We can have this experience. I'll learn from it. You'll learn from it. It's all rosy in the astral. And that's where you can get to like new age flippy. Oh, everything's fine in the astral.
It's almost like, to take it back to a more like PG-13 level, it's like wearing a seatbelt. It's like when you put on a seatbelt, you're almost making an agreement like, okay, a car crash could happen when I'm in this vehicle. Whereas some people, it's like they don't wear a seatbelt at all, and they live their life with that kind of free attitude. And it might seem reckless to someone who kind of lives maybe glass half empty, but when you start living glass half full, like you're describing, and you're in control of those agreements you're making on the psychic level of things, the physical world starts to align with that. At least that's what I've found in my short journey.
Right.
So
But
far.
the ultimate thing is it comes to that choice of that person in the physical world. That's why the physical world's so important, because it's way fun to think about astral and all that, but right here, right now is the most important thing, because that's when I make the choice, and that's when I learn from the choice I made. I'm spiraling up and getting better, or I've really got to figure a way to learn that lesson again because I just screwed up.
Right.
And I think as we get more of a look in our mind, I haven't had a proper argument with anyone for probably a year and a half, and in that time there were I had a good excuse to have a short temper at that particular time, not because of the person I was in an argument with, by the way, but you see the we'll call it the Eckhart Tolle a pain body or something. You see it drift in, and it's like, you know what, I'm gonna ignore that because going along with that is gonna be a bad time.
Yeah.
So that's why the now is so important, because the choices you're making at the moment is that's what you're learning from. You can't, in the physical, you can't actually learn that much from the astral. I mean, that higher version of you that definitely learns from that, but here I guess I'm getting to the point that a lot of spirituality is like a really fun, enlightening hobby, but what you do in the physical is the most important thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it all connects.
I would say you use the astral and the spiritual to navigate the physical more cohesively.
yeah, you can learn these lessons better if you have a, you know, a bit of an ear open to the small quiet voice that is intuition from the astral. It certainly informs what you do here, but I, a trap is just I see people in is falling into like this isn't important and all that's beyond, that's what's important. And that's one that, I mean, you're not going to enjoy your life here if you get caught in that trap. You're almost waiting to die in that case so you can experience the beyond.
I think that's what happened to like the spiritual culture of today. They're all trying to live for ascension and out of the body, and like life is better somewhere else, you know.
I've
Is
I've managed I've managed a few out of body experiences. You know, for me, it's a super fun hobby, right? You know, like you talked about your whiteout time. I more and more, my lunch break, I meditate, and it's been getting a little dangerous because I'll try new meditations. I'm like, gee, I hope I don't fall asleep. And sometimes like, oh crap, is it 5 hours later? It's like, oh no, it actually worked out. Yesterday I tried a brand new one, and I think I did fall asleep for about 5 minutes, but and I
Well,
came.
and that's the type of exploration that Tara and I are starting to get into more and more. But we found that intention setting is so important to the process. Like we set the intention to have more dreams and remember our dreams and be in of those things have happened in the past following days since setting that intention, and that's just one example of the things that we've found we can do when we multiply the personal energy, because setting an intention yourself is powerful, but then you multiply that by two people, it definitely adds some potency to the mix.
Yeah. And that's why I'm also going with like, okay, I'm just a hobbyist with it because I find when I really have a profound, like, you know, like I just directly entered a lucid dream experience, which is amazing. And maybe the next week I'll have it happen again. And after that, it's going to be like 6 months before that happens again. It's like I just used all that like psychic fuel or something. So, you know, the yogi in the Himalayas that's living this ascetic life, they're saving all that energy so they can do this every day constantly, where, you know, I'm living my life in the samsara, and I can only muster enough for hobby energy. But that's what I'm, you know, that's my plan right now. So
No, that's your path for sure. I think that's sort of the Jungian, Joseph Campbell, all these things that were revealed at that time in the 20th century really inspired that, hippie movement that got kind of turned in the wrong direction with drugs and the music industry. But the initial movement was this grassroots movement of people saying, like, let's try a different thing, let's go out into nature, let's live in a more cohabitable communal society. And that's not, communism, folks. That's just people living in small communities and working together. That's something that has gone on since the beginning of time. Back to Carl Jung's pattern, right? We were deviating from the pattern by stratifying ourselves and trying to do this empire city building. I mean, this is all, the consequence of Rome and this imperial, parasite that's affected our culture, I think, in a detrimental way. Some people live in countries where cities are maybe better. I don't know. Japan seems to have it going on differently. But here in
when I first came to
America,
Japan, they're like, it's not better, it's just different. But you know what? I'm gonna call a few seats in Japan superior.
right on. Yeah, and I mean, there's definitely cities in America that are better than others. We traveled a bunch, and there's a big contrast, and I think that's part of it. I maybe deviating from my original point, but the place is sacred. There's an energy to place, and you know this all too well, that where you're at, it's probably very magical, a very potent place to meditate. You can't help but meditate when you're in a place like that. And That's why we moved to where we're at right now, up in the mountains, far from where we grew up. And it's definitely having that effect for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I mean that's the magical approach to life. The hardcore yogi, of course, is taking a very different direction, but they want to, I should hope. But as for us, we're exploring, we're having fun. Again, whenever you do have a dream, that is the Joseph Campbell adventure, because while you're having that dream, you're exploring the unknown, basically, which is the whole thing in the first place.
Right.
But here, I actually brought up. I'm just gonna read just a few of these lyrics. Find a good one there. Yeah, I was sticking words together, and it's just weird. The first line is, "It's time to turn you on, forget the past that just went wrong, call for the bill, erase the life you led until." I'm just, wait, these are freaking concepts here. I'm just like, it's wild. So, um, getting back, is there something that you feel like you've created that you're really like, hey, I didn't make that. I mean, you did, but it's definitely coming from somewhere else. As a musician, I guess it usually happens in musical form, right? I'm like, I didn't really write that song. Paul McCartney said he didn't really write Yesterday, he just woke up with it.
Yeah, I mean, I have some crystals that I would wrap when I was a couple years ago, not too long ago, and there was definitely an aspect to that which felt like I was channeling these patterns, like it was very meditative too, like working with the stones and wrapping them. It takes multiple hours to complete one piece, and you're using pliers in your hands for the most of it. So yeah, it definitely felt that way sometimes, but no, I mean, at 26 years old, no, I think
Uh,
maybe the podcast, I definitely get into this kind of flow state when I'm on my podcast, certainly when I'm like interviewing people one on one, but not necessarily. And then also with just conversations in general, like my whole life studying this type of information, like, the title of my show, My Family Thinks I'm Crazy. I mean, all of these ideas that we're discussing that are part of Carl Jung's work, I was kind of figuring out in a way without necessarily knowing about Carl Jung until a couple years into it, but he was definitely prominent in my research. Aleister Crowley being another person, we talked about the first time I was here, but many others. I mean, Thoth, which is the more esoteric, right? The seven hermetic principles, like all of these things have contributed to a knowledge base that is kind of in a part of my mind that's not always accessible, but easily accessible when I get into this flow state of information. And I think that's kind of the preparation of information that leads to this type of conversation.
yeah, yeah, definitely. I think once someone with lots of guests, once they kind of get into not we'll call it a rant, just for a nice short word, but yeah, sometimes you just see, oh, this person's not even thinking about what they're saying, and not in a bad way. It's flowing, like you said.
Right.
I guess with your crystal work, it's a little, in Japan, it's a little bit like the ikebana, the flower arranging, or the bonsai or the tea ceremony. The idea is to learn it and then let it flow. And sometimes people get stuck in Japan. They get so stuck on the rules, they don't realize that you're supposed to forget the rules at one point too.
This is one I made pretty early on, but it's one of my favorites because the stones are particularly meaningful to me. But it's labradorite, fire agate, and quartz. But yeah, this is the type of stuff I would do, wire wrapping, and this is more simple. Some are more intricate, but yeah, don't typically wear them anymore, but they're definitely a big part of shaping and molding who I've become.
Yeah, my crystal, I don't do any crystal work, but I do have a bag that I always, my little shaman's pouch. It's always in my pocket, which I rarely even open, but it has about 10 stones, most of which I got from a vending machine on the side of a mountain in the middle of nowhere.
You wanna?
It's like the Zoltan machine in Big or something. But Tara, any interesting creations from beyond? Just to ask a straight up weird question.
Well, just when I'm painting, whatever comes through on the canvas, I'd say. It's not me.
Definitely when you're painting, but yeah, getting back to the point that all of us are channelers, and some people do it in more flamboyant ways than others, I guess.
Yeah, more performative ways.
Yeah.
I think I'm getting close to I gotta go to work time, but are there any other last kind of thoughts or observations you want to throw from the Jungian direction?
Well, I gotta say, I love the look of the documentary itself. I mean, obviously 1959, it's kind of black and white, but it was very detailed. It was good, and I like the little intro with the water and the pond, and the outro with the notes floating across the water. But I'd definitely be interested in watching more documentaries like this, interview style. I found it because I was looking for like an intro clip to my conversation with Miguel Connor, episode 51 of my podcast. And I think it was 51 or 53. I'm not sure exactly which number it was, but Miguel Connor. And yeah, we talked about Jung in that podcast. And I wanted like, actual voice, clip from Carl Jung. And then I found that documentary and used the particular quote about knowing God rather than believing in God. And so, yeah, that's when I was inspired. Like, let me send this to Matt and let's do a podcast about it. So, yeah,
Yeah, I'm
that's about
always
it.
game for that sort of thing. Yeah, it's actually funny because my viewing of things now is almost 90% active. Sometimes, and I'm probably not going to have an interesting dream experience when I do this. I'll watch a few minutes something in bed. That's the only time I like pleasure watch things. Otherwise, I'm like actively watching, which I think is good because I don't get entranced by what I'm watching. I'm really thinking about it. Especially when I do sci-fi movies, sometimes I'll take the notes and never even look at them. It's just the act of doing them a lot of times. Same thing when I was in school. I'd take notes and never study the notes. Just the act of writing them was enough.
Yeah, that's very similar to something Tara and I are going to begin to do automatic writing. It's almost like you start writing and magic happens, but we can definitely, I think we could find a documentary in that vein somewhere, a writer or something, and come back and have a conversation about that, or the previous thing we mentioned that's escaped. Oh,
Holy
was it
Mountain.
Magic Mountain? Holy Mountain,
Magic
yeah.
Mountain's an awesome theme park.
Yeah, we were about to go get some dinner ourselves, but we hope you have a nice day at work out there in Japan. Our day is about to kind of end over here on Square Mountain.
You want to tell them where you're at on the internet and such?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity, and thanks again for having me. Tara, thanks for joining me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks.
definitely. Thanks to both of you for coming on.
Yeah, you can find Tara and I uh, on the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast. We've got some new episodes coming out this week. I just put an episode out with Dan Danunaki about the Bach saga and ancient origins. We talked about ancient aliens and a bunch of very interesting topics. And yeah, myfamilythinksimcrazy.com if you like browser based, but you can search us in any podcast app and you'll find it. I prefer if people listen on Podcast Addict. And if you really want to get into like the synchronicity of everything, you find us on Patreon, patreon.com/MFTIC, where Tara and I have a new podcast called The Synchro Mystic Experiment in the Ever Expanding Now. And it's all about how you can understand these concepts in a way that shapes your life in the direction that you want to go in instead of the direction that's been pushed upon you by whatever the circumstances of your birth or your upbringing or your choices, wherever you're at in life in the now. We want to help you out in a way that helps us too, because that's what it's all about. Give and receive. So help us out, folks. Hit us up on Patreon.
And I've been listening recently. I think the only one of your recent ones I didn't listen to was maybe episode 52 because I was just tired of that topic. I think it was 52. You probably know what a topic I'm talking about because I don't feel like saying it on my podcast and getting it flagged or something.
Oh,
So,
yeah. Well, I'm not afraid of that on the RSS feed. You know, we're secure on podcast 2.0, and pretty soon we're going to be on the satellite. The podcast's going to be connected to IPFS. So stay tuned for more updates on that, and Alt Media United as well. Matt, I'd love to have Aural Hygiene on the podcast cooperative that I founded. I think I mentioned that to you the first time we talked.
Yeah,
but
yeah, definitely.
I'll send you
Looking
over
for.
an email, and we'll get you a page on our site, because I definitely want to have you a part of our cooperative all the way. Our first Japanese representative in the cooperative.
Right on. Yeah, definitely. Right now, this one's Aural Hygiene at Facebook, Twitter, on your regular podcast feeds. Hopefully, some other places soon. We do have a Patreon for several podcasts. Some of them are about Pokemon or Monster Hunter, or the other one I'm on is about sci-fi films. But that's on Patreon at Podcastio Podcastius.
Right
Yeah.
on.
So every time I say it, I'm like, did I just say that right or not? So again, thanks for joining. And if you don't quite hang up, because I'm going to give you a tip or two. But as for everyone else, keep it groovy out there.
Right on.